though it is going to be a relatively cool day, temperatures between 16 and 22 degrees Celsius. Into the weekend, something more widely unsettled will be developing as these frontal systems start pushing their way in from the Atlantic. Those isobars also squeezing together across the southern half of the UK, particularly southern coast of England. We'll see some very strong winds, coastal gales, perhaps possible later on Saturday. This accompanied by outbreaks of rain for the vast majority of us. The far north of Scotland getting away with the sunniest and driest start to the weekend, but there'll be further outbreaks of rain and showers as we head into Sunday and the start of next week as well. Bye-bye.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point.
And action.
Sergeant read my superstar panel. They're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not
believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Good evening, I'm Rory Smith. The group CEO of NatWest, which includes Coutts, has apologised to Nigel Farage after his account was closed. Dame Alison Rose apologises for what she calls deeply inappropriate comments made about Mr Farage in the now published papers. She continued saying it is not in the company's policy to drop a customer on the basis of legally held political and personal views. A full review of Coutts' processes and how these decisions are made will be carried out. Speaking on his show here on GB News this evening, Nigel Farage says questions remain for NatWest.
There's a reiteration of the offer to give me NatWest services. This offer was made verbally to me just before I went on air on GB News a couple of weeks ago. I also wonder if I go to NatWest, how long will it be before they close me down? Because there's no guarantee that they'll keep me as a customer, and that does genuinely concern me.
Polls have now closed in today's 3 by-elections in England. All 3 seats in Uxbridge and South Ruislip, Selby and Ainsty and Somerton and Frome have been held by the Conservatives since the last general election in 2019. Voting will continue through the night. The Prime Minister's press secretary has previously acknowledged it would be tough for the party to hold all 3 seats. The illegal migration bill has now become law. It will prevent people from claiming asylum in the UK if they arrive through unauthorised means. The government also hopes the changes will ensure detained people are removed either to their home country or to a third country. The Home Secretary says the focus is now on appealing to the Supreme Court to make Rwanda one of the countries people can be sent to. Strikes by health workers could end up costing hospitals billions of pounds. That's according to Matthew Taylor, the head of the body that represents NHS organisations. He says they're on red alert for the next 48 hours as senior doctors walk out over pay. He says health leaders are deeply concerned by the impact that strikes are having. The government says it has listened to the BMA's demands. Well, meanwhile, rail passengers face disruption today in the first of 3 days of strike action this month. Up to 20,000 rail staff are on strike over job security and pay, which caused disruption and cancellations across many services. 14 train companies in England were affected. Members are also walking out. That'll be on the 22nd and 29th of July. TV, online, DAB+ radio and on TuneIn. This is GB News. Now though, time for headliners.
Hello, welcome to Headliners. I'm Simon Evans. Joining me tonight, my good friends Lewis Schaefer and Nick Dixon.
Oh, I like that. Thank you.
Yeah, it's all right, isn't it?
It's better than I was expecting. I'm a good friend.
They often tee me up with something embarrassing. I then have to retract. But that's fairly...
This was more perfunctory, as if written by someone else.
Yes.
And you just met us tonight.
You know what? I'll take it.
Yeah.
We are short-staffed at the moment, so the likelihood of teasing has diminished. So let's take a look at the front pages. The Daily Mail kick off with an apology of sorts from Coutts, but silence from the BBC. We have the Telegraph. Bank boss says sorry to Farage over accounts, and there is a picture of her with the Prime Minister. Guardian. Taxpayer to fund 45% pay rise for royals, despite the cost of living crisis. The iPaper has 1 in 6 people will be stuck on the NHS waiting list if doctor strikes continue, warn UK's top medics. The Daily Express, fury over plan to axe pension tax break. And finally, Metro, just stop foiled. Those were your front pages. So we kick off the in-depth look with the Telegraph, Lewis.
My good friend Simon, good to see you.
Yes.
A bank boss says sorry to Farage over accounts. NatWest chief executive apologises for deeply inappropriate, quote-unquote, dossier comments. Of course, she didn't apologise for it. She basically said, we didn't mean anything that we said, but they said a lot. They cancelled the person's account. This woman, Dame Alison Rose, sounds like a Jewish girl from Great Neck, where I grew up, in New York. I find that name very attractive. She's the chief executive of NatWest, who owns Coutts, and I think it is a victory for Nigel, but I think it's more important. It just shows that this is a major issue, because if people started to take money out of NatWest, most people don't know what Coutts Bank is, but they know what NatWest is. That the people who watch this channel have banking at NatWest. And I think if the tide turned and people said, let's punish NatWest for treating one of our own this way, and potentially in the future, every one of us, you or me, right? If that happens, it could be a Bud Light type situation with Anheuser-Busch in America.
It would be, I think, obviously I can't determine whether that's likely to happen, but I think it'd be a very dangerous territory if we started treating banks in the same way that we do, like, beer brands, which are fairly interchangeable. But the banking system, I think the important thing is to try and not make that sort of, another front on the culture war.
It's a bit late. I mean, they brought it on themselves.
Yes,
I mean, there apparently is this Facebook group of 10,000 people who have had their accounts closed by NatWest. So if they all put in subject access requests, then it jams up, just the amount of paperwork alone would be a big problem.
Yes.
So the bank has made a massive mistake, and it is a victory for Nigel Farage and for freedom of expression. And also, the CEO, though, if we look at what's happened here, I mean, she's been paid $5.25 million in 2022. Either you're aware of what's happening in your department and you approve of it, which is very bad, or you're unaware of what's going on in your own bank, which is also bad. So it's very bad for her.
And to be fair, the comments she's made simply don't tally with what we've actually seen anyway.
No.
They don't seem to connect with it.
No, they say they do not reflect the view of the bank, but they obviously do reflect the view of the bank.
Sorry.
No, sorry. We're being too polite now. We work at a bank here.
I want to say this clearly. It would be absolutely horrible that the banking system is so crucial. But at the end of the day, I think the bosses need to, two problems. One is the problem is that the bank is owned by 25 or 30% of the British public.
38.6%, and it was as high as 84% post 2008. So when people say it's a private company, not really true.
Entirely,
not really. But I think the most important thing is that we, the people who are watching this, have power. And maybe if NatWest has a problem, it will teach the powers that be in Whitehall, and will also teach the bankers at the Bank of England.
Maybe it would be useful if you went in to set up a bank account, if they had a little list of what their values are and, who they regarded as being inclusive and who they felt was a little bit like...
Our values are corporate authoritarianism, and I click no.
What has The Guardian got, Nick?
Guardian going after our great king again. So taxpayer to fund 45% pay rise for royals despite cost of living crisis. So Charles has been struggling in the cost of living crisis, so he's getting a pay rise from the royal family's grant is due to go from 86 million to 125 million. That's the sovereign grant, which is pegged against the Crown Estate portfolio. Now, the Treasury was saying, look, the Guardian claim, we always have to say the Guardian claim because, fake news, the Treasury was spinning it to give the impression the king would be taking a pay cut, but it's actually a big pay rise, and the Treasury have sort of admitted that according to the Guardian. So, fair enough. It's
the argument, I mean, not that, when you get down right, to the basics, of course, you can dispute whether or not it's fair that he has this estate. But is it pegged to the value of the estate? That's why it's gone up? Rather than, So in a sense, that's an accurate representation of the facts on that.
But it says once it goes up, it can never come down. So if the estates start losing money, it's going to have to come out of the tax revenue from other things. And I think the basic problem is that they're going to give him a 45% pay rise. There are millions of other people who have been cut short. And the other thing are the people, I know this station, I know you're like a royalist and whatever, but is King Charles, does he represent Britain or does he represent the one world kumbaya globalist world? And the truth is, I think there's a war going on, and maybe I shouldn't say it, but there's a war between the people out there of England who are not being supported by... I'm going to get into trouble.
No, I know what you mean. I support the institution. We all loved our Queen, but King Charles is, of course, a bit woke and a bit globalist. I agree.
Well, they've narrowed. I mean, I believe he has narrowed the terms of what is the royal family and those people, the number of people who are entitled to get some sort of support from the state. But if it is being funded from his own property portfolio and that has increased in value, I understand that you might claim about that it's a moot point whether it's stolen.
stolen.
But there,
it's 25% of the estate's
stolen ultimately, isn't it? Property is theft.
Yeah, it's set at 25% of the estate's net profits. It's a complicated calculation.
Interesting to know exactly why it's gone up so much. That's what I'm intrigued by, because property portfolios, generally speaking, have had a bit of a rocky time of it in the last couple of years.
Maybe it's not. Maybe it has gone up because of the housing.
It's probably
crisis.
invested very shrewdly. Probably owns Belgium or something.
But can I say something for the people out there watching me? They might have seen me in, I think it was season 3 or season 4 of The Crown, where I was an American. I thought
this might be about you.
I played an American reporter who was interviewing Prince Philip, and he was making a similar complaint about how he wasn't going to be able to afford his yachts and his castles.
Wow, that's an interesting peg. Thank you.
You go watch it.
So let's have a look at the I paper now, Lewis. 1 in 6 people on the NHS waiting list.
Well, this is a non-news story, basically. It's the first one of the whole thing is non-news. But according to the I, which is owned by the Daily Mail, did you know that? Okay, 1 in 6 people will be stuck on NHS waiting lists if doctor strike continues. Right. It says estimated 9 million. I personally, and as you can see how healthy and beautiful I am, I love the NHS. It's amazing. You don't have to worry about getting sick. I think today's medical society, the industrial pharmaceutical complex in America and in here, in Germany, everywhere, is unnecessary and is not good value for the dollar. And you should try to stay out of the hospitals. And even if you've got bad disease, I'm sorry, I'm not going to say it. If you've got a bad disease,
that just seemed like a collection of random sentences to me.
Yeah.
But
what do you think, Nick?
Well, look, the people are losing. Even doctors will lose popularity if they keep the strike going, because it's damaging other NHS services as well. That's the thing. So it's not even just about loving the NHS or not loving it. Though I always have a slight worry talking about doctors in this way on telly, that one of them will see me and then you go in for treatment and like, you're that guy attacking me on the TV. I'm not. And then they don't check you properly or they misdiagnose. There's always in the back of my mind, you've got to be careful. The train drivers are more like, bang, have a pop at them.
They won't recognise you.
Well, mind you, I do get the train more than I go to the doctor. So
well,
maybe I got it wrong.
On the chin. I had an appointment, a regular thing I have every couple of years, just to keep something monitored recently. Went to a hospital. It was about half an hour away, an early morning appointment, and not until I got there did I find that it had been cancelled due to the strikes. There'd been no attempt to contact me or anything on that.
No.
And I think that's the first time I've encountered an actual, the hard edge of it myself, and it is extraordinarily annoying.
Well, here's the soft edge of it. You should listen to Louis Schaefer. You should stop going to the doctor. You should eat meat.
Just stop going to the hospital.
I mean, you say that sunscreen is a myth, and I actually got skin cancer from not wearing enough sunscreen, so I do question your misinformation there.
No, you might not have gotten it from it.
We have no time for this.
We just have time now for the final section of The Mirror, Nick, which is about Prince Andrew's notorious Epstein interview.
Andrew's Epstein lies on Newsnight. So this is a big one because it's bombshell court evidence that contradicts Prince Andrew's previous Newsnight claims that he only saw Jeffrey Epstein once after his 2008 jailing. But actually, he did see him again, according to an email on 14th of June that year, where Epstein told the banker, Andrew just sat next to me at dinner, which seems like an email purely written as compromise on someone. Just to say, guys, if I ever end up in in I've got all these emails. Do you know what I mean? Surely that's the only reason you send such a banal email.
By now, we all understand he was, I think, what was it, Eric Weinstein's phrase, wasn't it? He was a construct, right? He was a fiction, Epstein.
He was a Kaiser Soze. He didn't exist.
Well, almost certainly state activated, an external state in order to. He was for gathering compromise.
But the point is,
he was an
Prince Andrew.
An extortionist or blackmail. I don't really know what the difference between those things are.
Yeah.
But that's one of the worst crimes. I mean, there are lots of bad crimes, but I think for men, the biggest fear that we have is the extortionist, is the blackmailer.
For me, it's the sex.
It depends what, especially if you're doing.
Sex is the fear.
If you're doing
extortion,
no, Lewis. It depends what you're doing in your private life. We don't know what Lewis is doing. But Prince Andrew would be sweating now if he could. That's all I'm going to say.
Can I tell you?
Just as well.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but I'm going to be in The Crown episodes.
Again in The Crown.
You were 7 playing Jeffrey Epstein.
There is
being
an
extorted.
resemblance, and you look a bit like him as well.
That's what I'm saying. That's my joke.
Part 1.
That's the joke.
Coming up, Taliban banter, Quran burnings, and supermarket malarkey. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Controversial.
Welcome back to Headliners with me, Simon Evans, joined by Nick Dixon and Jeffrey Epstein. So, independent now, Nick. When it comes to the Taliban, you do not, in fact, got to hand it to them, it seems.
Yeah, this is Tobias Ellwood facing Defence Committee no confidence vote after Taliban remarks. You may well have seen he'd put out this video, and the parts of it were misguided. The music was a bit strange. It was a pro-Taliban video with upbeat music, as if he was launching a new leisure centre. It was kind of slightly misguided.
Or looking for venture capital.
Yeah. And Piers Morgan is hammering him about the music. And the music was misguided, and the tone was a touch misguided. But the essence of what he said wasn't that bad to me, because I have a friend who went out and lived there in Afghanistan, and he basically confirmed everything that Ellwood said, which is that since we've fled and had to abandon it, they've actually taken over, and they have brought a certain amount of law, a certain amount of security, and they've cracked down on the drugs trade, which was acknowledged in all the broadsheets recently when they called the...
Massively.
They called it was the best counter-narcotics programme ever from the Taliban.
Yeah.
So we have to acknowledge this.
They've made an actual war on drugs, and they've won.
And they've won,
Yes, yeah.
But where he's getting hammered, of course, was the optics of the video and for seeming to sound like he was praising the Taliban and being a, quote, useful idiot for them. But really what he's saying is this. He's saying, let's acknowledge we lost this thing, we've left. They've actually done a good job of the basics. Now we have to work with them incrementally on rights for people and women's rights and on to stop the economy crashing. Whereas everyone's just saying, how can you say that they hate women? Of course, no one has any rights at this point in Afghanistan, so that's what we don't talk about. We're annoyed in the West that they don't have, like, a trans darts league yet. But the fact is, they've started off with the basics.
Spent 10 years in Afghanistan trying to
do that. And so people are sore that they've done it better than we could.
No,
it's not that they're good. It's not that they're good.
Yeah.
But he's arguing for an incremental approach, where some would say, OK, you can't work with the Taliban at all, which might be what you're saying.
The truth is, I'm not going to say that. I'm going to say you can't work with the Taliban. Is that we're going to sit there and we're going to change these people's minds about women? Nothing. We lost. You know, saying that it's better run is like saying France was better run in 1940 after the Germans came in. Well, yeah, it was probably better run. Am I allowed to say that? Maybe you should say
Vichy.
that. Yeah, the Vichy government. There was more peace. There was more peace in France.
Well, they were fighting the English, the French, at that point, of course. You have to remember that. You know,
I'm just saying,
we were happy as pigs.
We work with a lot of terrible regimes. I mean, Trudeau said he admired the basic dictatorship of China. I'm just saying, he's got it's a sort of hard-nosed diplomatic approach, saying we have to work with them. That's all he's saying.
The key difference here, I mean, I understand the comment point, but the key difference is that Germany had invaded France and we had invaded Afghanistan.
But we left.
So it's like if Germany left, but France carried on having a regime you didn't like. That would be the similarity, not what you're talking about here. That is an extraordinarily important part. Afghanistan has a very different culture, and I am, you know, all joking aside, I'm not that comfortable with the way they don't allow women to be educated, but it is obviously what Afghanistan has been like for centuries. It's not something that's been recent. Islam is like, you know, it manifests in different ways in different countries, but it clearly has a different idea about, you know, sex-based rights and so on than we have in the West. You don't just remove your ambassadors and your embassies and all kind of diplomatic contact from every country whose regime you don't like. It's much better to, as you say, gradually build up an infrastructure that allows them to take their place at the table. Otherwise, you just drive massive migration, failed states, harbouring terrorists. It all goes bad again.
We, or America or Britain, can't even do that here, which is raise up Britain and manipulate Britain through our government. So what makes us think we're going to do it in Afghanistan? We'll just give it up.
So often I feel we may have talked past each other there. Telegraph now, Geoffrey. And with modern international comms, the riots are coming before the Quran even is burnt nowadays.
Yeah, this is a happy story. Protesters, and along the same lines, really, according to the Telegraph, protesters storm Swedish embassy in Baghdad ahead of Quran burning in Stockholm. And this guy burned a copy of the Quran. The police let him. And I'll tell you something, I'm in favor of free speech, but burning somebody's, it's like shouting fire in a movie theater.
In a Quran.
In a Quran. So he set fire to it. And there's the thing. And number one, let's be honest with ourselves, is these people in Iraq and across the Middle East and all the Muslim countries are way more excitable and fightable, and they're more passionate than we are. And you shouldn't mess with them unless you're prepared to fight with them. This was provoking them.
But that's, I mean, putting aside, you know, possibly a politically incorrect way of describing people's behaviour, the Quran burning is in Sweden, and they've got wind of it, and they're invading an embassy in Iraq. It's not like they've gone to Iraq and burnt the Quran there, which I think, you know, what you described there, that would be, if you were a Swedish tourist and you were complaining that you burnt an Iraq in the centre of
that would
Baghdad,
be different.
Then you would say, oh, come on, you know, have some awareness of what the culture is.
No. This is exactly the same as the other thing, is that those people in Iraq, why shouldn't they have the right to manipulate Swedish government the same way we in Britain are trying to manipulate Afghani culture and Afghani government?
Go on, Nick.
Well,
it's a good point.
Yeah, if you like. It's a question of whether you think a culture is better when you can burn things like the Quran or the Bible or whatever, or whether you think that a culture is better where you can't. Because obviously in Muslim countries, you couldn't do it, and they have safe countries and many positives. But in Western countries, we have secular liberalism. Then, you know, what I would prefer is a Christian country where we bring back Christian blasphemy laws, because I'm not convinced that English liberalism is separable from Christianity anyway. But this is the question, should you be allowed to do it? It's tasteless, as you've implied, but the question is, which is a better culture, one where you can do such things or not?
The Swedish government, I mean, this is interesting in the sense that they're playing words. It's not a million miles away from Alison Rose at NatWest. They said, we absolutely condemn burning the Quran, but we are unable to do anything about it legally, and we're unwilling to impose sanctions on it.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of playing with the word condemn, isn't it? Condemn from a government should mean that we actually take action against it. I'm not saying they should take action.
No, but they're the ones in charge of that decision.
But I mean, there's something weird going on, isn't there? Because Sweden, of all the states in the world, has had a reputation for being the most understanding and tolerant and so on. there are clearly some people who are finding its tolerance of Islam beyond, you know, it's broken some of these people. Because to burn the Quran, you're right, it's utterly childish. It's lowering yourself, to be honest, to their level to some extent, which is, as you say,
what you are saying is that they're bad, and that's what
I'm not saying they're bad. I'm saying as you did.
You're saying our Christian, whatever that means.
No, you didn't listen to what I said or understand it at all.
That our liberalism that comes out of Christianity is better than their kind of thing.
No, that's not the point I was making at all, actually. I was making a point it's a bit too complicated for this format, but it was not what I was saying.
All I'm saying is that I think burning books, burning flags, it's childish behaviour, and you should try and rise above that and demonstrate that your politics have evolved beyond that kind of, like, it's like a toddler tantrum, isn't it? It's like, you know, knocking all the toys off the table because you're not winning the game. It's a futile gesture, and it is like... But, again, you know, to actually throw somebody in jail for it, maybe if they didn't sell the Quran in Sweden, maybe that would be a way around it. I don't know.
I'm not saying that.
The Sun now, a story from 1982, Nick.
Yeah, this is furious EU calls Falklands Malvinas in New Deal as Argentina vows to make fresh bid for sovereignty negotiations. So, yeah, it's this weird story where it was breaking last night. They suddenly decided to call it by the old original name or whatever, or the name the Argentinians want. It's the EU messing with us, basically. But it's a bit similar to the Coote story. And I wonder who came up with it. It's sort of like it's like a Twitter intern who's written something ridiculous. You feel like there's someone at the EU who said, yeah, call it the Malvinas. You feel like, how has this been signed off on?
Do you suspect that it has been done in order to provoke, or do you think it's simply somebody saw it, a Spanish-looking word, and thought that's probably its real name, isn't it?
It could be either, couldn't it, with the EU? You wouldn't put anything past the EU, because they do an awful lot to provoke us.
Well, it's been 40 years, you know, since it was properly in the headlines, I suppose. Even, you know, in Britain, a lot of people, younger people now, might not know.
They might not know. It could just be ignorance, but it's a bit quite an unfortunate kind of ignorance, because now it's kicked off.
Again, it's not something that Britain invaded and took over like under Margaret Thatcher or something. It's not something like that we captured in the colonial era and that's trying to return to its former pre-colonial. It's a colony that was established by the British and remains...
Yeah, and the key point is that 99.8% of the Falkland Islanders wanted to stay part of the UK. That's the key point.
And that's it.
So why did the EU use that term? I don't think it was by accident. I think the EU is proper butthurt over Britain leaving. They were fed up with having to listen to Nigel Farage all those years before he left. And I think it was like two fingers up and I don't think we can look for them for help. We, as a British person, Britain is in trouble in the Malvinas. The next time there's an attack, will Britain have...
Oh, well, they didn't help last time. They sold missiles to the Archies. You know, do you remember that, the Exocets?
Yes.
Yeah, no, we don't expect any help.
Yeah, so don't think it was like a mistake.
We won't be looking there. Staying with The Guardian now, Lewis, and as someone who frequently shops while half-cut, I fully endorse this message.
Oh, that's you. When you're... What does that mean? Aren't you fully cut?
Drunk.
Oh, drunk.
It's an English phrase, like certain other words you hadn't heard before.
I thought it meant like being circumcised.
Yeah, no.
I chop all the time.
Half-cut, that's be a good name for the show, though, you're right, yeah.
Half-cut. Half-cut, I'm full cut. And anyway, The Guardian, make your price labels clear, a watchdog tells UK supermarkets. The CMA, which is the Competitive and Markets Authority, said basically that stores should not stoke food inflation as it looks into competition on key categories as milk and baby food. And this is basically the story. No, it is a real story.
Is it?
Because it is a real story, because it shows how deep the state goes into every bit and pieces of somebody's life.
Do you know what it is? It's the centralisation.
It's the centralisation, exactly.
Of everything.
It's the
death of love.
Well, it could cause the death of love. Is the state is the worst to fight for competition.
But what we seem to be, the specifics they seem to be talking about is like confusing people with deals, 2 for 3 for 2, that kind of stuff. Is it, or is that the problem here? Rather than actually prices not coming down, it's like you can't work out what the best deal is.
But why should the state be involved? If one company is doing like all these crazy deals, another company could come out and say, we're honest with you, we are Tesco's, and we're going to tell you exactly how much it costs.
I tend to agree with that, to be fair, Nick. What do you
No, I was honestly bored to tears by the story, so for once I was happy just to let Lewis run.
Well, that's it for
because it's boring. It's a boring story.
Coming up, North Korean naughtiness, T levels in decline, TikTok takeover. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry, here with your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. A lucky few of us have managed to see some sunny spells throughout today, but there are still a few showers lingering on into the evening and into Friday as well, particularly for parts of Northern Ireland through Scotland as well. Also a few just clearing their way off the far southeast of England as well. In between that, we will start to see some clearer spells developing, and that will allow those temperatures to just slide off into single figures for particularly rural areas, particularly for parts of central Scotland. We could see close to 4 degrees Celsius, so a bit of a chill in the air first thing on Friday morning. That will allow for some sunshine, but there's also going to be the central area from Northern Ireland, southern Scotland down into northern England, where it is rather cloudy from the word go, and that cloud will continue to push its way across the rest of England and Wales throughout the day. The risk of some scattered showers in there as well. More prolonged rain for parts of Northern Ireland. Underneath all that cloud, though, it is going to be a relatively cool day, temperatures between 16 and 22 degrees Celsius. Into the weekend, something more widely unsettled will be developing as these frontal systems start pushing their way in from the Atlantic. Those isobars also squeezing together across the southern half of the UK, particularly southern coast of England. We'll see some very strong winds, coastal gales, perhaps possible later on Saturday. This accompanied by outbreaks of rain for the vast majority of us. The far north of Scotland getting away with the sunniest and driest start to the weekend, but there'll be further outbreaks of rain and showers as we head into Sunday and the start of next week as well. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views, and often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not
believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in their home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to Headliners. So, Nick, we have international news in the Times now. Sounds like North Korea's American hostage indulged in the usual preliminaries to finding out.
Yeah, this is US soldier Travis King yelled, "Ha, ha, ha," as he fled to North Korea. Wouldn't have been my words, but...
I don't know about fled to. He was sort of toying with it, wasn't he? Wasn't he, like, kind of, like, teasing them or something?
And is it fled if you're going into it? I always think of fled more as leaving.
Yeah.
But he tried to go into it, and someone who was watching assumed it was some sort of prank or stunt for TikTok, because we're in the post-Mizzy era. But, of course, it wasn't. He was actually... And then the soldier shouted, "Get that guy." That's when she realised it wasn't. So he has a bit of a... This guy, Travis King, has a bit of history. He punched a man in the face at a nightclub. We've all been there on one end of that or the other. And in February, he was fined about £3,000 by a court in Seoul. He's done various little things.
He's a little bit, like, unstable.
Yeah, he's a renegade. He's a maverick.
Yeah.
He's a Lewis Schaefer type.
He's not a political dissident, necessarily. He's more like a stunt-orientated thrill seeker.
An adventurer.
Yeah.
Well, I mean...
Well, he's going to find out what it's
like. Do you remember that guy who jumped off a cruise ship as a lark about a couple of months ago and was never seen again? And totally, disappeared, eaten by a shark or something. And I think this is what it was. It's a kind of a tragic story. This is what it sounds like to me. It's like just a guy, he maybe was having a bad week, a bad day, and he just says, let's try for something else, and now he probably regrets it.
I suppose the worst thing, I suppose, is they kill him or whatever, but the more plausible bad thing is now just like endless grinding diplomatic gears and all kinds of compromises and humiliations and so on, just because of... I mean, I'm almost be inclined to just let him stew, wouldn't you?
Yeah, and it's the Biden White House has to get him out, so can you imagine? I mean, Biden won't even remember his name or his own name, but Joe Biden.
Whereas Trump, of course, had managed to create that jovial and...
détente with Kim Jong-un.
They were like buddies,
It was like virtually a rom-com.
Ah, well, it's a shame. What was the big, tall, pink-haired basketball player who...
Brittany Griner.
Griner, yeah, the one who went to Russia. No,
oh, you mean Dennis Rodman, who he sent there as emissary?
That's right,
yeah.
That's who we need to bring. He's still around, isn't he?
Yeah, Rodman could sort this.
This is
a job. This sounds like a job for Dennis Rodman.
Guardian now, Lewis, and a story about T-levels adversely affecting the young, but it's not what you or I would have thought.
Yes, well, I've got reasonably high T-levels, actually.
For a man of your age.
Yes, I've been tested. I put it on Twitter. I don't have my board for Twitter, Lewis Schaefer at Twitter, LEWISSCHAFFER. Anyway, this story is totally suited not to me because I don't know anything about the English education system.
Vocational for me as well. I've left it 40 years ago.
Vocational T-levels offer England students poor value, Ofsted says.
Yeah.
And basically what T-levels are, they're technical training, and they used to be called the B-Techs. Yeah. And then they lead to the A-levels, and
they're alternative. Basically, if you're academic and you want to get into university, you do A-levels, and that demonstrates you have the way of thinking you consider a desk. And T-level is something more likely to lead directly to a job in principle. And
they're saying it's not good value. No. But whenever has an educational system been good value, especially the state? They're always behind the times. It's run by the government. It's run by the state. It's more centralization. You can't.
Lewis Schaefer drinking game, and it's the death of love. Take a drink.
It's the death of love.
I mean, it's a classic.
It's a waste of money. The educational system. You're better off not being in school.
Okay.
What do you think?
Well, look, they used to be B-Techs. Everyone knew they were a bit rubbish. Yeah. They've changed the name to T-levels, but you know the phrase, you can't polish a T-level. So that...
Yeah, very good.
There you go. That'll do. I'll end on that. You look like you wanted to move on.
It's awkward because there is a kind of stigma still attached to leaving school at 16. My father left school at 14. I'm not saying that was ideal, but in those days you just could. You did. He still got a reasonable career in a white-collar kind of, trajectory towards financial management, but it wasn't totally nowadays, if you leave school at 16, people assume, you may as well just be licking windows for the rest of your life.
But you know what? The people who stay in school to the end of time, they're just as bad off.
Oh, no,
leave school, eat meat, flee to North Korea.
Save the NHS. Staying with the education racket, Nick, and Times have some pretty incriminating evidence that students make extraordinary progress between 18 and 21.
Right? They see old grade inflation. So a quarter of sixth formers with 3 Ds later achieve a first. So very suspicious that people who have 3 Ds are smashing it with the first. And there's even one school, the Northern School of Contemporary Dance,
where 81.3% of its graduates get first. Wow. So that's convenient, isn't it?
That's dance, right?
Yeah, that's dance. Yeah, dance is dance. But it's still...
If you went to college to get a proper degree, let's say an engineering degree or something, a first used to indicate a proper elite level.
That's back when a first was a first, Simon. But it's, what really annoys me as well is, I hate to talk about it, but I got the 3rd highest grade in the country on my history A-level. No one said go to Oxford, no, nothing like that. You just got nothing. You were kicked into a gutter. It was the North. It was a long time ago. Now you just have to show up. You get a first, even though you're basically
but not
thick.
At A-level, clearly. They're still giving out Ds at A-level, so presumably employers will start looking at A-levels rather than degrees, because it sounds like they've been inflated less.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Yeah, so there are more...
And then the T-levels are even better.
We sort of said this yesterday, but I'll repeat it anyway. I honestly think, I understand why young people want to go to university for the sex, drugs and rock and roll, the kind of the break between school and work. You want to have a little... Give them a year... Just have a lot of fun. Don't have any kind of pretense for 90% of them they're learning anything. Make it sort of like national service, a little bit like kind of dredging the canals, but at the community service, and a lot of parties, a lot of fun, and then just have occasional IQ tests and like big 5 personality tests and stuff. Yeah. See who's clever, see who's conscientious, see who's capable of organising a team.
Isn't Jordan Peterson?
It's quite easy to do that, wouldn't it?
Jordan Peterson's basically doing this kind of thing, isn't he? Online, like,
is he?
Yeah, you should join that, Simon. You could do like a little Simon Evans course, just YouTube, 5-week course.
You know what? I went to one of the top schools in America, the old-fashioned way.
Yeah.
They thought that my father was
mixologist.
They thought that my father...
You went to an Ivy League school?
I didn't go to an Ivy League school, but I went to a very expensive prestigious...
It was adjacent to an Ivy League school.
And they thought... The reason I got in, because I was a New York Jew, and they thought my father had the money to pay for it.
And then they found out...
And then they found out that it wasn't quite as...
But they still got the fees, or did you get thrown out?
But
they had to partially subsidise me.
The real reason you got in is they thought you were Epstein.
Because we have to be honest, I look amazing.
That is how he started, wasn't it, in education? Interesting story. Anyway, more disturbing news now about the brain rot overtaking our young people. This is in the Telegraph.
No, it's not. It is not about the brain rot. It says TikTok now the biggest source of news for young teenagers. Ofcom reports that young people favor online news sources like social media apps, while bond with traditional brands are weakening. And this is a study, a report that was done by Ofcom, who have... Why do they have business looking at this? Ofcom, for people who don't know, stand for Office of Censorship of Media. They're the censorship arm. And basically what they want to do is they want to close down TikTok because it's owned by the Chinese and because it's taking away people who are watching the BBC, which is the state propaganda network. This article is just PR from the state propaganda network.
What do you think?
Well, just to provide the balance for Ofcom, I love Ofcom, because when we get an Ofcom complaint about Lewis calling Ofcom the censorship arm, we should have the balance of me saying I love it. So, look, this is about, well, you're talking about TikTok, right? Because you went so off the story, I wasn't even sure it's the same story. They're saying that TikTok is the biggest source of news for young teenagers, which means they're getting most of their news through the medium of dance, for a start, which is weird. But there's a question, should we ban it? It's actually a reasonable question, because although, you know, they're saying here China bans the Western TikTok, which isn't the best guide what China do, but there is an argument, if it's pumping Chinese propaganda in, do we need that in the country?
I don't know whether it's Chinese. I watch sometimes, I never like log on to TikTok deliberately, but sometimes you watch a video on Twitter and it turns out to be part of a TikTok thing, and if you scroll accidentally, it starts scrolling. And I watch a few of them. None of it is what I'd call news. Usually it's either like criminals getting their comeuppance on Brazilian CCTV, or maybe some sort of fight breaking out in a...
Or young people dancing, or magicians, weirdly.
Exactly. I wouldn't call any of it news, but I've got to say, 12 to 15-year-olds, I don't remember getting any news at all at that age. Maybe
exactly. Do you remember when we were young, they were saying, oh, TV, these kids are getting all their information from TV. And it's the same thing.
Well, it wasn't from China, though, to be fair.
We should not be... You are right to question what I'm saying, and you should step right in there and say, Lewis, you don't mean that? That's a bad thing to say? You should say it.
We do, that's what we do.
Gentlemen, coming up in the final section, Nerf guns under fire, Grayson Perry admits to theft, and food phobias and foibles. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners on TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my new show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m, where real people get to meet those in power and hold them to account. Every week, we'll be hearing your views from up and down the country in the real world. Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Headliners for our final and shortest segment, so we'll keep these really tight, guys. Lewis, over to the Telegraph now and a row over the legitimacy of Nerf gun wars in office environments. There's only one way to settle this.
Yeah, I don't care. This is a total non-story. And it's the same, along the same lines, that female IT boss sues for sex discrimination after a male colleague had Nerf gun wars in office. And this woman, Sarah Longman, out of Croydon, was dismissed. Well, actually, she lost her job. She was making over £90,000 a year. She sued for sex discrimination after complaining her male colleagues at this construction thing, which was mostly men, were shooting
around with Nerf guns.
Working around Nerf guns. And what does she do? She goes to a government tribunal.
A tribunal,
Instead of, I believe people should be allowed to be hired at will, fired at will, quit at will.
Well, I mean, there are certain things. I mean, you know, I think in an ideal world, freedom of association, but there are certain, perhaps, like cultural sensitivities that could be observed. But there were other women in this office who said, no, it's fine, it's just the guys mucking about, you know?
Why is everything that men do anti-women? It's just men just existing.
It's just somehow Nerf guns. It's not like they were, like, waggling their, you know...
But even if they were doing that, let the women form their own
It's not anti-women to shoot a Nerf gun, is it? We're not allowed our own spaces, and we're not allowed to just be men in general spaces. By the way, she called them the mates club. The classic line for someone who has no friends. Oh, you're the mates club. Also, we're being mates.
Working in an office, if there were 7 or 8 women and just I was the one guy, and they were always sitting around talking around, I don't know, women's issues, I might feel slightly excluded. Well, you've got to make a choice.
But would you sue them?
You think to yourself, exactly. Do I stay here and try and do I wear headphones, like, you know, or do I try and?
Or do I just learn about 50 Shades of Grey and fit in?
Exactly. Telegraph now, Nick. And Grayson Perry has confessed to what he describes as a modern sin, but I bet it isn't really, is it?
It totes isn't. So this is Grayson Perry says he's guilty of cultural appropriation. He's got this retrospective at the National Galleries of Scotland called Smash Hit, going back through his career in pottery, which I'm sure is very important. And he talks about how these days just absorbing influences is thought of as cultural appropriation, which is now a modern sin and one he's guilty of. This is a non-story, OK? If there's ever a non-story, this is the centralised death of love of non-stories.
But I will say, I like Grayson Perry, and I think he is actually quite a good ambassador for cultural appropriation as the way to move things forward, as the way to create new art. He's as much into craft as he is into art as well. That's what I like about him.
He seems all right.
He's producing this kind of conceptual crap. His stuff actually looks all right, if you like.
True, right, yeah, true.
You know.
I'm not familiar. Anyway, as Picasso said, good artists borrow, great artists steal. And you have to steal from somebody. Can I just do a shout-out to Jeffrey Parks out there, who's a guy who texted us, who messaged us. We're on YouTube. Yeah. Not on YouTube, on Twitter. And he says, give Jeffrey Parks a mention. He's in sunny Llandudno.
OK, hi.
This is like a Butlins gig or something.
A couple more stories to try and squeeze in now. Raindrops on the rose is not just one of Julie Andrews' favourite things, but a potential source of green power.
Oh, my God. I don't know what you're going to call this story, but it says solar panel tech breakthrough generates electricity from rain. And number one, it doesn't generate electricity. It says that, according to this story, which is in The Independent, which is not a newspaper, it's a website. I don't even know what it's doing included here, but I'm going to play along with you guys because I like the work. But the solar panels that generate electricity from raindrops, quote, could allow them to produce power in any weather. And the big operative word is could. Could, can, maybe, potential. They haven't done it. It's called droplet-based triboelectric.
So
it totally isn't.
You really don't think? What do you think, Nick? Has it got anything to do with this?
The only thing that struck me was they're using raindrops, so harvesting raindrop energy to power solar energy. Why not just make the raindrops make the energy, cut out the middleman? Does that make sense?
Excruciating.
And now I'd like to give a shout out to someone from my school. Just kidding.
Daily Mail.
I would never do that.
To enjoy a bit of harmless hang-up sponsorship. This is oddballs with their phobias. This is some TV.
Yeah, this is more up my street. So this is I was terrified of red food after freak rocking horse accident, because rocking horses are famously red, but now I've beaten the phobia. I think it's because a rocking horse smashed into his face and there was blood everywhere. So I think it's the redness of the blood that he was... And it's all about people... One can't eat hard foods, one can only eat white bread and potatoes. It is a thing. I was ill with a stomach bug recently, and then I was like... It's quite hard to get back onto food. You could see how it could happen. You know, I went on a really strict diet at one point where I couldn't eat wheat or dairy and all these things. And you develop what's called orthorexia, where you just get so paranoid about any foods. So these are people that have got locked in that mode.
So like an autistic spectrum disorder.
How dare you?
Some people have, not necessarily in your case, but some people want to eat certain colours, a plate of all the simple and stuff.
In these cases, it seems to be linked with trauma. And there's this guy, Dr. Felix something, who basically cures them of it, apparently.
No, it is not. It is not a problem. Humans are not meant to eat red food. Red plants are... The human body associates red with poison.
I thought it was blue.
And it's also some blue. We shouldn't be eating plants at all. It's basically humans are saying to ourselves...
But red is...
yeah, but that's not plants. He couldn't eat ketchup, he couldn't eat anything red.
Yeah, no, meat is red.
Steak is red.
Meat is red, but this kind of food, this kind of red food... you don't eat plants.
So you're saying follow your instincts, follow your colour guides, and all your phobias.
Yeah, and of course, in Lewis's era in America, red food meant communist food.
Red under the bed. That's the subtext. Well, the show is very nearly over. Let's take another quick look at Friday's front pages. The Daily Mail has an apology of sorts from Coots, but silence from the BBC. The Daily Telegraph bank boss says sorry to Farage over accounts, but the picture is of her having a laugh with the Prime Minister. The Guardian, taxpayer to fund 45% pay rise for royals despite cost of living crisis. The iPaper, 1 in 6 people will be stuck on an NHS waiting list if doctor strikes continue, warns UK top medic. And Daily Express, fury over plan to axe pension tax break. Finally, Metro just stopped foiled. Those were your front pages. That's all we have time for. Thank you to my guests, Lewis Schaefer and Nick Dixon. We're back at 11 p.m. tomorrow with some other people. If you're watching at 5 a.m, stay tuned for breakfast. Otherwise, thank you. Good night.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vaughtry, here with your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. A lucky few of us have managed to see some sunny spells throughout today, but there are still a few showers lingering on into the evening and into Friday as well, particularly for parts of Northern Ireland, through Scotland as well. Also a few just clearing their way off the far southeast of England as well. In between that, we will start to see some clearer spells developing, and that will allow those temperatures to just slide off into single figures for particularly rural areas, particularly for parts of central Scotland. We could see close to 4 degrees Celsius, so a bit of a chill in the air first thing on Friday morning. That will allow for some sunshine, but there's also going to be the central area from Northern Ireland, southern Scotland down into Northern England, where it is rather cloudy from the word go, and that cloud will continue to push its way across the rest of England and Wales throughout the day. The risk of some scattered showers in there as well. More prolonged rain for parts of Northern Ireland. Underneath all that cloud, though, it is going to be a relatively cool day, temperatures between 16 and 22 degrees Celsius. Into the weekend, something more widely unsettled will be developing as these frontal systems start pushing their way in from the Atlantic. Those isobars also squeezing together across the southern half of the UK, particularly southern coast of England. We'll see some very strong winds, coastal